Managing instant app access, pre-launch, and session linger. Session linger. Session. That is actually very hard to say. Session linger. So, okay, number one. If you haven't spent a moment building a 6.5 Xen app server, you might just do that. In fact, go right now and go build yourself a Xen app 6.5 server. So one server as a Xen app server, and then another server as a web interface server. All right, right now I'm going to use one called XA Nugget 1, and this is XA Nugget 2 as my web interface server. They don't necessarily need to be separate servers, but I did that. Well, you'll find out later why I did that when we get to a future Nugget. The reason why I tell you this is so that you can actually see this thing actually work. It's very cool. The whole notion behind instant app access is to reduce the start time for applications. You might have experienced this, right? Your users, they log in, and they go through all the steps that are required for the login process to their machine, and maybe you've got stuff that runs as a logon script, takes time to log on, they complain, and then after they log on, well, then they need to log on to receiver, and then after they log on to receiver, then they need an app, and then the app has to generate a session on the Xen app server, and you can see it just creates a lot of time, and suddenly your users are wasting 20 minutes of their day just to get logged in. Well, that actually has been, for a very long time, one of the big complaints about remote applications. It's a little bit more of a problem in the Xen desktop world because of the whole spinning up the entire desktop. That takes even more time. But in the session world, I still do have to create that session. Right? I do have to actually go through a secondary logon process that the session requires in order to do something. Well, what Instant App Access does is it launches sessions, or it pre-launches sessions the moment that receiver actually authenticates the user. So user logs into their machine, the receiver dialog box pops up and asks them for the username password, or perhaps you've got SSO turned on, so it happens during the logon. And when this occurs, the moment that the user logs in and receiver authenticates, well, receiver then kicks off a pre-launch session that sits resident in the background. The user doesn't know it's there, so that when they actually click on one of their remote applications, well, the application appears to launch instantaneously. Now, what we're not telling them is in the background, well, there's actually that session that's sitting out there resident. Now, this is designed to be useful for distributing loads specifically during peak traffic periods. And in fact, there are ways, it's very cumbersome in this version, but there are ways that you can configure receiver to pre-launch either at logon or even at specific periods in time. As you'll find out in a minute, there's actually some very odd behavior in the way pre-launch is actually set up. It makes sense why Citrix did it this way, but it's sort of weird, and you need to know this because it's not very well spelled out in Citrix's documentation as to why this occurs in the way that it does. And in fact, it appears to do something entirely different than what it actually is doing. In this nugget, we are going to actually configure pre-launch. In fact, I've already got it configured. I'm just going to show you how to do it. And then also some policies that are associated with the pre-launch activities. Linger, there's pre-launch, and then there's some like termination and disconnection policies you have to set. Very simple stuff, really. Now, before I do that, though, we have to kind of spend a minute really focusing in on what's going to happen whenever this instant app access actually takes off, right? So the whole notion of licensing in Xen app is based on the concurrent user, right? So how many concurrent users do I have running on the system? And I buy enough licenses to support however many users I expect to be using my Xen app farm at the same time. This allows me to have some users that are using Project right now but not later, or somebody else that's using Visio but not later. Well, when I turn on Instant App Access, well, again, I've got this desktop, and the moment that the desktop logs in and receiver authenticates, well, it's going to initiate a session, which is going to take one license away from the concurrent user license count that I have baked into that system. Oops. So the one and very, very important thing that you have to be conscious of is if you decide to turn this on, you may be burning through more licenses, potentially unnecessarily, just simply because you now have a session, and the session might be faster, but, well, you got to burn that license whether or not the user is going to use it or not. Now, these Linger, and then there's some other user policies you can put into place to minimize that effect. Linger, essentially, we'll talk about this more in a second, but Linger is essentially, okay, well, after that session pre-launches, well, how long does it linger around waiting to see if anybody wants to use an app or not? So I can adjust those as I see fit. When I go to actually configure pre-launch, the way that you do that is by right-clicking one of your applications and choosing other tasks, create pre-launch application. Right now I have here, so this is my XA Nugget 1 server. One server, one Xen app server. I have one client we'll look at here in just a minute. I have one application that I've published, which is the App Center. Okay, I figured, well, we always publish Office. Let's do something different for a change. And everybody always publishes Calculator. Let's try something fun or useful. So I've published Citrix App Center, and I've configured it so that, well, anybody can actually access it. You obviously wouldn't do domain users in your environment, but you get the point. Now, when I want to set up pre-launch for a set of configured users, again, I right-click on one of my applications, choose other tasks, and then create that pre-launch application. Now, here's the weird behavior. Look at what that says. That says pre-launch Citrix App Center. Now, a reasonable person would assume that the pre-launch environment had anything to do with App Center, or Word, or Calc, or anything, just because of the name there. But it in fact doesn't. Here's interesting. When I go to take a look at the pre-launch environment, the application properties there, the location that I'm actually, the command line that I'm actually executing has nothing to do with App Center. In fact, it is merely just pre-launching the pre-launch environment. Right? That's not the Citrix App Center executable. This is the pre-launch executable, which goes about initiating that session and sitting in the background mode waiting for an application to launch. So don't get confused. Don't get really worked up by the fact that this is named Citrix App Center. In fact, it may be a good idea for you to just simply remove the name of the application itself and then name it something smarter, like pre-launch environment. Now, how this gets defined for people is based on what its configured users are. The reason why this is done this way is simply that the pre-launch is gathering its information from the application that you base it on. Okay, who are the configured users? Who are the servers? Are there any settings that are there? But it has nothing to do with the app. And I don't know why they did it that way, but well, it's the way they did it. So all this said, what does it look like? Let me go here let's go down here to the servers, and you'll see that I've got myself logged on to the console here. And then I have my two listeners that are currently open, the ICA listener and the RDP listener. Now, when I log on to a client, and I get that receiver, the logon prompt for receiver, well, something interesting is going to happen. Let me log on here. I'm going to log on to this Windows 7 machine. And once logged on, one of the first things that's going to pop up is the receiver logon box. I've purposely kind of configured this so I have to actually see the receiver logon box. I can speed things up here by just actually launching it down here from Citrix and Receiver. So from this logon box, okay, I'm not doing anything except just authenticating into Xen app. Punch in my password again. You can SSO this if you want, so it happens as part of the logon. I log in. So once that logon occurs, ignore this because I'm using a developer edition version of the license. Everything is intended to happen in the background, but this is my demo license, and you'll see this in your demo licenses as well. Once I log on, nothing's there, right? Nothing's really happened. I mean, if I go here to all programs, well, I see the Citrix App Center that is now available in my start menu. And if I go down here to the receiver, the little tray icon, I can see that I have online sessions here. I can view the preferences once again and take a look at the online plugin I have now notably enabled with active sessions. And in fact, if I go here to XA 1 and then refresh, you'll see that I actually have a pre-launch environment application that's running on that desktop. Pretty cool. The idea here is that with this pre-launch environment, well then when a user then needs to go and access one of the applications that's made available to them, well, I go here, I go All Programs, I click Citrix App Center, and then bam, the application is immediately available. So that's the whole point here with this pre-launch, is that, well, all right, well now I have access to my apps, and I don't have to go through that really long and very uncomfortable logon process a second time. Again, you won't see that error message if you don't pop up error messages as part of your logon procedure or your licenses aren't developer licenses. Now here under policies, the policies, let me see, I think they're under users here. The policies for pre-launch are all set up here under ICA session limits. And I've actually configured 4 of them here. Some of these you've seen before. But there are 2 here related to Linger and 2 related to pre-launch. And you should be already familiar with the concept of disconnection and termination. Okay, when do I want to disconnect this session but leave it resident? When do I want to just terminate the session entirely? So what this does is it gives me the opportunity to say, you know what, in the Linger case, after the receiver client logs in and creates that session, how long will that session linger around just waiting for a user to try to launch something before I disconnect it and then ultimately terminate it? Also down here, when do I disconnect an existing pre-launch session after a specific number of minutes? Okay. In fact, actually, I've got those backwards here. This is the pre-launch, and then up here is after the last application exits. Okay. This is the other use case, right? So a user ends up ending their last application that's a remote application, and their session terminates. And if they go, oh, darn, I've got to go and use project again. Well, when they go to use project, they've got to go through that entire process a second time where they log back in and create the session again. Well, Linger allows you to keep that session lingering around after they're done for a certain number of minutes. Sorry about that. Those are in the opposite order. So these are really what you have to be aware of. You configure these 4. And once you configure these 4, you give them a certain number of minutes. You'll want to make the disconnect number of minutes somewhat smaller than the terminate number of minutes. And there you go. The sessions will now linger and pre-launch for your users. Again, be careful here, because when you do that, your number of licenses will decrease by 1 for every one of those users that's configured. And this is set for the user. So when you set this to domain users, every single user is automatically going to consume a license the very moment that they log in. So be aware of that. Now there's one more setting that I do want to kind of introduce you to, because this setting is kind of buried inside of Citrix's documentation, and it is designed to fulfill another use case that this whole instant app access is kind of centered on. So we've talked about, okay, I want to speed app access after login. We've talked also in the Linger case, I want to speed app access after the user's done, but maybe they're not really done. Well, also there is this problem that happens sometimes every day, or maybe on certain days of your business days, where there's a bunch of users that are attempting to launch an application at the same time. So users are coming in, it's the morning time, right? Everybody pops in at exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, and you have this huge logon storm for all these users that are attempting to connect up into your Xen app environment for their applications. And because there's a logon storm and there's all this activity going on, it takes forever to log in. This is a kind of a big deal. So in addition to the just-in-time pre-launch, which is what we've been talking about to this point, there is fairly buried in the client side the ability to do a scheduled pre-launch, which initiates the launch between a specific period of time that you can configure. Now, what's kind of they did not pull this into policies, and one assumes that they may at some future point. In order to do this, you actually have to adjust the registry. there is, under the pre-launch key here for state, by default, the state is set to just-in-time pre-launch, which is the moment that we authenticate. I can set this from 1 to 2 here, the D-word value from 1 to 2, and then set a schedule, which is this various kind of code here, which will say, I don't care about necessarily when I authenticate, but instead, at this period of time, go ahead and initiate some of these pre-launches. So if everybody comes in at 8 o'clock in the morning, well, you could potentially set this so that all the pre-launches happen between 6 and 7:45, which eliminates that logon storm or distributes that logon storm around that period of time. This is one of those situations where either this happens to you and you hate it, or you have no idea what I'm talking about. So if this is you, you'll need to use some sort of mechanism. Group policy preferences is an excellent tool to do this, to adjust the schedule for when these things actually occur. You can set user overrides as well for which users are going to override, or you can set these in HKey current user also. So instead of doing it for the machine, you do it for specific users on the machine. That gives you the ability to use group policy preferences and, for example, an Active Directory group. Merge those two together and then deploy it to HKey current user as the user logs in. So again, there's some fairly rich flexibility here in how you end up doing it. And again, also schedules here for HKey current user. So be aware of these, because again, this is really kind of one of the big new features in XenApp 6.5. It's one of the ones that a lot of people have complained about because you either experience this all the time or you really don't, because it's not a big issue for you. If you do, be aware that instant app access is intended to reduce that application start time. So what have we talked about in this nugget? We have talked about instant app access and the pre-launch and session linger features that are now baked into 6.5. We talked about how I can authenticate sessions after receiver authenticates, or even via a scheduled mechanism. How this is a tool that's useful for distributing load during peak traffic periods. Some of the really weird behavior and how it was actually configured here in 6.5, and hopefully that'll get resolved in future versions. And then in the interaction portion, we spent some time configuring pre-launch and then also those user policies. Speaking of policies, coming up next, I'm going to spend a bunch of time going through 6.5's new policy settings. I think you'll be interested in seeing what you can now control with Citrix policies in XenApp 6.5. But until then, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.